Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mama Pies Before the Lesson podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Smiley. What a ride we've had through the book of John, digging into the actions of Jesus and his apostles, watching Jesus as he dealt with his followers, as well as those that wanted to cancel him, watching him remain 100% committed to his assignment. We rejoice with him in his triumphs, and we weep with him in his sorrows. We ultimately found faith in his words and his actions to the point of confessing with our mouths the Lord Jesus and believing in our hearts that God raised him from the dead. He said, and then we shall be saved. As the old folks used to sing, I know I've been changed, 'cause the angels in heaven done signed my name. We saw disciples, ordinary men, not quite knowing what they were signing up for, but following Jesus just the same. We saw their missteps. We saw their setbacks. We saw their hopes rise, and we saw their hopes fall. But ultimately, we saw them hold to God's unchanging hand. And when the day of Pentecost had fully come, as we studied on last Sunday, they were all in one place, and they were all on one accord. So there, in Jerusalem, during the Feast of the Weeks, the Jewish celebration of the first fruit of the harvest, there at Pentecost, we saw the first fruits of Christianity. But on Sunday, the whole tone and tenor of our conversations over the last quarter will change. We'll jump back into our time capsule and travel back into the time of wilderness wanderings, back to a time of what some call the greatest prophet to ever live, that being Moses. Back to a time when the children of Israel had recently left Egypt after having endured 400 years of slavery. We'll go back to a time when Jacob's original children had long since died off, and a new generation of Israelites were now the adults in the room. Some struggling to hang on to their rich lineage from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and some embracing the Egyptian cultures and traditions. So on Sunday, the title of our lesson is Living as God's People. Scriptural basis of our lesson is out of Leviticus, the 19th chapter. There, we'll see Moses struggling to reunite God's chosen people with God, both physically and mentally. We'll see Moses serving as a mediator between God and the children of Israel. After having established covenant and commandments at Mount Sinai, the children of Israel grumbled, complained, and rebelled so much against both God and Moses that they turned what should have been at most a 3-month trip from Egypt to Canaan into a 40-year lesson on being decent, respectful, and appreciative, and finally on learning to love God and to learn to love their neighbor. So the question that I've got, and maybe you do too, is how did we get from there to here? Let's dig into this thing and try to figure it out. Hopefully, after today's conversation, we'll feel more personally in tune with and understanding of the challenges that our biblical heroes in the upcoming Sunday school lesson had to deal with. So if you like what you hear, click the button below and subscribe to our channel. Now, first, let's take a look at the word Leviticus. It basically means matters pertaining to the Levites. We all remember Levi as one of the 12 children of Jacob. Although the name was derived from Levi, the son of Jacob, the content of the book speaks to so much more. As the children of Israel left Egypt, they were trying to find their footing in their relationship with God and with Moses. They were also coming to the realization that freedom for them had been a pipe dream for so long, and now, within a God's moment, they were free. They had to learn from scratch who God was. They'd heard about him, but they hadn't directly experienced him. The book of Leviticus deals with God's expectations for his chosen people. It addresses issues relating to sanctifying and purifying themselves. It speaks to the Levitical priesthood. After all, that was the assignment to the Levites, to be the priest. It also introduces the sanctity of God and holiness in everyday life. In addition, it speaks to the types of sacrificial offerings that the children of Israel were expected to adhere to and to learn from: the burnt sacrifice, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering. And in addition to the sacrifices and offerings, it taught the children of Israel how to manage their calendar. Sabbaticals every 7th year. During that year, slaves were to be set free, debts were to be canceled, and the land was to go uncultivated. During the year of Jubilee, which was the 50th year after 7 cycles of 7 years, all debts were to be canceled. Learning and adhering to those guidelines or laws was the only way that the children of Israel would be able to maintain a right relationship with God. So as we open chapter 19, we find Moses continuing to lay down the law, the same law that we ultimately see Jesus blaze a new faith path into a closer walk with him, one in which serving God didn't require access to God through another person, but we saw Jesus give us all direct access to God the Father. Again, these people had to reestablish a relationship with God. Not only were they still getting to know Moses as the leader of their nation, some were still remembering him as a prince of Egypt. God to them was a mythical figure in the eye of many that they had never experienced up close and personal, walking in freedom versus letting go of that slave mentality. Well, that takes time. Moses, as mediator for God, was beginning to speak to them about social order. God told Moses to speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, "Be ye holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy." He told Moses to tell the people about the importance of respecting their mothers and fathers, help them to understand that they need to respect and rest, just as I did in the creation, the Sabbath day, and to also keep it holy. He told Moses to remind them that they shouldn't turn to idol gods. They'd seen enough of that in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Again, much like teaching children, hard-headed children, let me add, they had to start from scratch. They had to learn how to do things decent and in order. When you sacrifice a fellowship or peace offering to the Lord, this is what the Lord was telling Moses to tell the people. Sacrifice it in such a way that it will be accepted on your behalf. Don't offer me any junk or leftovers as a sacrifice. Chapter 19 also speaks to the holiness code. Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now, this call to holiness is not directed to just the priest, but rather to all the congregation of the people of Israel. And by the sacrifice of Jesus, it's directed to all of us. Now, in the holiness code, it addressed throughout Leviticus chapters 17 through 27, it said that holiness extends from the sanctuary to the land and also to its occupants. It is what sets the people of Israel apart from the people around them. Holiness is a mark of distinction. Impurity, while still the opposite of holiness, is no longer relegated to the realm of ritual, but instead extends to personal conduct. So on Sunday, we'll learn how to care for one another, care enough about our neighbors that when we reap the harvest that God sets out for us, we shouldn't take it all. He said, leave some for your neighbor. When we're in our vineyards that God allowed us to borrow, don't be greedy and go back and pick what you missed the first time. He said, leave some for the poor, the foreigner, and the downtrodden. What a lesson for the newly freed Israelites then, and what a lesson for us that are living this life, hoping to live again with Christ. This lesson is just as pertinent for people today that are living this selfish, entitled, privileged lifestyle as it was for the newly freed Israelites. Remember, when Jesus told his followers on the Mount, after he told them about the Beatitudes, he then turned the conversation to helping them to understand that, well, I'll just let him tell you. Don't think that I've come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. So now we know following God's mandates are the only way that we can maintain that right relationship with our Father which art in heaven. Loving our neighbor as we love ourselves is imperative to being able to enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. He says, "Be ye holy, for I am holy, saith the Lord." Looking forward to next week's lesson as we go back in and dig a little deeper here on the Before the Lesson podcast. Until next time, be blessed.